Stephen Espinoza of Showtime Sports. Get my tongue working over it. Stephen, a couple of years ago, I asked you about the fight. Is it going to happen? Many people were saying, no, it's not going to happen. You told me it absolutely would, and that's the only reason I thought that this fight really would happen. It's real now. It's July 29th. Tell us about some of the negotiations, because I know you were there all the way. Was this harder than you ever thought it would be?
It was one of the more complex and challenging negotiations. And not for any particular reason. Certainly didn't have, say, the animosity that some of the Mayweather-Pacquiao negotiations had. It just was, look, we're at a interesting time in the business, in the media business, and understanding what the financials were. What is a realistic projection? How do you split up the pie? How do you balance the needs of all the different camps involved? But at the end of it, the one thing, and I think the reason I told you a couple of years that I thought about it, is that, as you've seen today, neither of these guys is hesitant at all. I think sometimes when fights don't get made or take a while to get made, there's a narrative among fans that somebody didn't want it, or somebody's trying to avoid it, or somebody's ducking. There was none of that. Both of these guys were hungry for it all the way. And I said, if that's the case, then there's always a way to work things out.
You've got a real feel for boxing, real sense for boxing. 42 years ago, one of the greatest welterweight title fights of all time took place. Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns. This one coming up, can this be the classic that one turned into?
Look, I think that's the best analogy. I think Leonard Hearns is the best analogy for this fight. But if we look sort of in a bigger window, you see this sort of welterweight generational fight once a generation. Certainly, that's one of the all-time greats, certainly that fight of that generation. But if we look forward, you get to the 80s and it's probably Chavez Whitaker. You go to the 90s and it's probably De La Hoya Trinidad. You get to the 2000s, it's got to be Mayweather Pacquiao. And I think this is the generational fight in the Glamour division for this generation. And I think, can it match all of those? I think, I've said in other interviews, there's a lot of times where, we lose sleep over the one element we can't control. You do all this work promoting, marketing, producing the event. There's one element that has a lot to do with people's enjoyment, and that's what happens in the ring. And that's the one element we can't control. And it's sort of disappointing for us when it doesn't work out the way we think it is. I have zero concern about how this fight's going to be in the ring. There is no way this is not a good fight with these two guys.
Let me ask, do you have a word for
You got it.
Do you have a word for Ariel Helwani and my friends Ariel Helwani and Kate Abdo for this
those are two of my favorite people, two of the most knowledgeable and influential people in the sport. Anytime they're involved, it elevates it. I love watching Kate on soccer. How she manages those personalities, and I think, candidly, I think that's why she is so good in boxing, because she can handle the difficult personalities.
And let me ask you, because of your close friends at CBS, have they expressed any interest for any content in terms of showing All Access? A few times, have they talked to you about that?
There's definitely interest there. Especially with all the different platforms from cable to streaming to premium. We've had some changes in our programming, moving within Paramount Plus. I think that gives us an opportunity to be more integrated with Paramount. And I think, look, we see that now we're moving into an area where streaming used to be completely devoid of sports, and now we're seeing, streaming is actually driving business in sports. So I think that's a good thing for the sport of boxing.
Appreciate the time, Stephen.
Stephen, are you concerned about the summertime? The television industry is notoriously slow in the summer. Good for the theater business, at least it used to be. Mm-hmm. Was there a thought maybe I should save this for September? This is a generational fight.
I think we're actually going counter to that, because in late July the sports calendar is pretty quiet.
It is, yeah.
So when we look at, say, September, November, October in particular, October is brutal.
Playoffs,
college football,
NFL,
so even September, everyone's really excited about NFL. It's hard to get coverage for anything else. July, there's baseball, There's some opening of camps in WNBA. There's not as much big time competition, so I think we can make a lot of waves and make a lot of noise in July.
Fair point.
Yeah,
Thank
July
you.
and August. Now going back to this fight. Now I know earlier you expressed disappointment when we had the thing stalled last year, but there's another element that you didn't talk about is patience, because you had to have a little bit of that in order to revisit. Like I talked with you in December about it, and it was like, okay, we had to reevaluate and then see what we could do this time. Like, talk about how patient all parties had to be in order to make the fight this time.
I mean, look, and that's part of the long-term view of this. I mean, there's a tendency, or at least a temptation, to sort of, when it falls apart, to go scorched earth. I mean, not me personally, but it's sort of like, screw everybody, those guys can do it, like whatever it is. And that, you can't do that when there's still a window, or at least a potential for a negotiation. So I give credit to everybody involved. Somebody could have just opened fire,
you had social media and that type of stuff, but still,
and there's some sniping back and forth, and that's fine. But no one said or did anything which sort of burned any bridges. So we were able to come back to it earlier this year, and this time we were successful.
All right, thank you.
You got it.